Hello and welcome to Reimagine 2021. This is our ninth conference in a monthly series of events, bringing you nothing but the best projects, bright minds, and leaders in the space. We've had various topics for the last 12 months, ranging from what DeFi is DeFi, tales from the crypto during Halloween, happy HODL days, NFT boom recently this last month. And we decided for this ninth event, let's do Game of Chains, Battle for the Throne, where we're discussing layer ones, layer twos, the pros and cons and advantages that we're all experiencing and have an impact moving forward on our projects and kind of the applications we're designing. So we've been fortunate enough to invite many talented individuals and teams to come speak with us, providing updates, insights, and all the above that's happening in crypto. I'll be your host today, Adam, from the Mouseball team, where we focus on early stage investments through our accelerator or providing development support to a number of growing projects, as well as education within the Mouseball University program. Our main objective and goals are simple. It's increasing adoption, use cases, and real world applications. And we hope to at least bring this through Reimagine, through all the content. So feel free to check that out. So again, I'll go ahead and stop talking here. Very fortunate enough to bring in one of our industry partners here, Nick from the Tellor team. He's a CTO. He put this panel together, and we're super stoked to kind of get involved, learn about what these projects are doing, how it involves Tellor, and not only that, talking about crypto in general from a technical perspective. So Nick, I'll go ahead and let you take it away if you can do a quick intro and get this panel going. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So as Adam was saying, I'm Nick Fett. I am the CTO of Tellor. And luckily we have the opportunity to get together three projects that either are using Tellor or may potentially use Tellor. Mainly it's just three guys who I sort of really like talking to, who I got the opportunity to bring on a panel together. So I'm super excited to kind of kick it off. Tellor, for those of you who don't know, we're a decentralized oracle, so we allow you to bring off-chain information on-chain. And right now we're sort of on Ethereum, but at the same point, we're starting to begin to move to other chains as well. And that's why, this is one of those exciting times where it seems like the entire space is starting to move to other chains, or at least think about it. Kind of before we get started, and I start kind of asking these guys some questions about other chains and their own projects. First, I'll let them introduce themselves and their projects. Maybe give us the minute or 2 minute elevator speech as far as who you guys are and what you do. And we can just go alphabetical. We'll go Brandon, David, and then Robert to keep it simple. So Brandon, over to you.
Sure, thanks. Happy to be here. So I'm with the Ampleforth protocol. For those who haven't heard about Ample or used it before, Ample is a cross-chain digital currency. Like Bitcoin, it's uncollateralized, so it's highly scalable economically, and it's also it's rules-based. But unlike Bitcoin, it has an adaptable supply that can adjust every day according to needs in the marketplace, which provides like a long-term unit of account that can unlock things like safe debt denomination or denomination of other financial contracts. So we're kind of in between a pure digital currency or digital asset like Bitcoin and something like a stable coin. But unlike stable coins, we don't have the centralization risk of things like Tellor do. Like we don't have to rely on centralized custodians. It's also very simple, so there's no extra risk added from extra dependence on marketplaces like liquidation markets or lenders of last resort. So we view Ample as being a sort of financial primitive or building block that can be used to construct more sophisticated but safer financial systems built on top of it on the blockchain world.
Cool. David?
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Just excited to be here. So we first got connected with Tellor from the Scaling Ethereum Hackathon, where my friend and I were one of the winning projects for scaling Ethereum. And basically what we're doing is looking at different ways to bridge cross-chain liquidity. What we've been seeing from just sort of like an inflection standpoint is that as crypto becomes more mature, there's tons of different chains, different solutions, different siloed environments, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to, move funds and sort of use them, go from chain to chain, et cetera. So the kind of focus we've been having is on Ethereum to start, and we've been looking at layer 2s to layer 1 as an interesting use case around fast withdrawals and things like that, where there's several hurdles in place in order to have like really good user experience. So where the sort of idea had come from was just having experienced some of the friction around moving to L2s in different chain environments or rollups. And so happy to and excited to kind of go into deeper details on that. And yeah, that's the quick summary of what it is that Xfil is trying to figure out. So
cool, thanks. Robert.
I'm the founder and CEO of Liquity. Liquity is a fully decentralized borrowing protocol, and it gives out loans by issuing its own like native stablecoin called the LUSD, which is pegged to the US dollar. And the main like selling points of Liquity as a protocol are that the loans are interest-free. You have to pay a one-off fee when you open your loan or when you take out your debt, but that's it. So there is no variable interest rate at all. And the second big benefit is the fact that you only need to maintain a relatively low 110% minimum collateralization ratio. There are some exceptions to this main rule, but in general, the system is more efficient by allowing you to take out more against your collateral. We're only using Ether as our collateral, and the system is fully immutable and it's governance free. So there is nobody who can change it at all. And we are not even running as a company our own front ends, but this is all done by incentivized third-party operators. And we are already using Tellor as an oracle, at least as a fallback oracle. So when our main oracle becomes defunct, we can fall back to Tellor.
Super cool. Thanks, guys. I think the first question I wanted to ask, so we're actually all building on Ethereum, but one question I don't actually know the answer to is, have you ever, were you thinking about building on another chain, or have you ever built anything on another chain? Because I think, you know, so us at Tellor, like we were trying to become a decentralized oracle, and we were in the Binance incubator. If you guys don't know, so we, you know, this was back in 2019, and then they were trying to get us to be one of the first projects over on Binance, and we were just saying like it wasn't ready, so we were like, we're going to build on Ethereum, and because that's where everyone is, and that was sort of why we built on Ethereum, and that it was just by far the biggest ecosystem, you know. But for like say Ampleforth or Liquity, there might be reasons that you would want to build on another chain. So I guess, you know, Brandon, or back to you, like, have you guys done anything on any other chains, or like what's kind of your experience over there?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, when we first started our project, this was almost 3 years ago now, I think. So we've been live for a couple of, I think our 2-year anniversary is next week that we've been launching live, which is
congrats.
Cool. But when we were first starting, yeah, thanks. When we were first starting the project, we made the somewhat, you know, at the time, controversial decision to not build our own blockchain, because back then this is where you were sort of expected to build your own blockchain, and that's kind of, if you weren't building your own blockchain, then you weren't really doing real work in the ecosystem, which is very different nowadays. But instead, you know, we were reading papers like Polkadot and Cosmos and that sort of thing, and seeing development in the space and thinking, okay, we could, you know, build our own silo and make people come to us, or we could just go where everyone already is. And so we decided with that second path. I think that was definitely an interesting, maybe the right direction for us to go at the time. And so I think, yeah, being multi-chain has been core to the DNA of the project for a long time. Like our first, you know, post was back in 2019, early 2019. And so since we were deploying on top of systems and we wanted to be everywhere, then being cross-chain was, you know, very core to the use case and value proposition that we were trying to build. So we've been, you know, thinking about this for a long time, but mostly in a waiting mode because it's taken so long for the space to develop. You know, it's very difficult work, complex systems to build and test and operate. So we're actually just making our first movements into the multi-chain world, like very, very soon, like within the next month. And, you know, we're hoping that, you know, we do a lot of the upfront work in the beginning to sort of build the infrastructure that allows us to do it. But once we get the basic building blocks in place, the marginal work of adding in extra chains should be rather small. Crossing our fingers, we'll know more when we get there. Provided that the chain is an EVM chain. If it's not an EVM chain, then it's going to require a lot more extra work. So that's sort of where we are in the project right now. Just starting to dip our toes into the multi-chain world. BSC is going to be the first place we go to, but eventually we want to be anywhere where there's like a ecosystem where there are users or people who are doing some sort of financial transactions. So it's going to be a really exciting space, and I think a lot of other projects are in a similar boat where we're just now to the point in the ecosystem where we can sort of see how things are going to develop for real this time.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, David, so for you, it's a little bit different, I would say, because you guys are bridging chains. So which chains, I guess, are you starting with, and do you see that kind of changing over time, even in your short company?
Yeah. So the way we're starting with L2s and L1 as like on Ethereum for like the basic use case, like the initial kind of MVP basic launch use case. We definitely see a lot of interest in expanding to like other popular chains outside of Ethereum. One of the big things I think I've learned just throughout my time in the crypto space has been, it's not just about the tech, right? A lot of it comes down to the community and the support, right? The developer experience of building on a chain. So, for example, I can remember going back in 2017, 2018, when I started tinkering around with some of the developer experience on a different chain. I won't say any names here or anything in terms of what it was, but basically just found it was sort of like crickets in terms of support and help. And whereas when you looked at Ethereum, you have this robust ecosystem of tons of different resources and developers. So I think that's also like been a big factor in which chains have been able to gain adoption, is just who can create an ecosystem in addition to the actual tech, right? So I think that's important, and that's a factor we would look at as we're analyzing different environments. I also think like an interesting trade-off is from UX to like security, right? Like if you think about something like Polygon, they've done a really good job of optimizing for user experience, making like the transactions low cost and fast and what people are looking for. But then if you think about like the underlying security mechanisms, maybe it's not quite as secure as like rollups, for example, but people don't really care because it's a better option from a UX perspective than what they have today. It'll be interesting to see how that changes once maybe rollups and other solutions kind of actually launch and have robust ecosystems and become live. So yeah, we're excited to like be able to be operating in a place where the fact that there are multiple environments and chains benefits us.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like, it seems like rollups are coming along a little bit differently than, I can remember, if you guys remember back like DevCon 2018, it was like the year of Plasma. And everyone was talking about how Plasma was going to change the world, and Ethereum was going to scale via these Plasma chains. And then, oddly enough, like Polygon sort of was this Plasma-based chain, and they're sort of doing it. But like Plasma sort of fell flat on its face, you would say. We didn't scale because of Plasma, and now it seems like, well, rollups are the next big thing. Do you think there's still that risk there, or is this for real this time? Are we gonna start moving?
So I think the risk is just, obviously, I think you're seeing this a little bit with the different rollup solutions is, it's quite technically challenging what they're building, even if it's less challenging than ZK rollups. Like optimistic rollups has still been quite an effort. And so you're seeing that sort of struggle to go live on mainnet with something like that. I think it's, we're getting close, it's happening. There's already certain things that are live on mainnet. It's just, they're obviously, to make it more robust, there's more coming. I think if you pay attention, like Vitalik and other resources that I kind of follow around these areas, there's no question ZK rollups offer a much more robust long-term solution than optimistic rollups. But at the same time, it is unknown of when those ZK will be actually feasible and to support this sort of generalized use case that is Ethereum, right? So I think that's maybe the thing. Like even Vitalik says, you know, optimistic rollups teams should probably have a backup plan for eventually when, you know, ZK does emerge. It remains to be seen when that is. I think there's still plenty of time for optimistic rollups. They're not going away, and it's
When
more
needs
practical. Yeah. So I think I think it really comes down to just like sort of the unknowns of the Ethereum roadmap, and there's like knowns of what will exist. It's just the unknowns are mostly around like the timing of it, right? And I think that's a big question. So
cool, thanks, Dave. And Robert, what about you guys? Were you thinking of another chain for Liquity, or?
Yeah, we have been exploring various chains for the last few weeks, I would say, and we stumbled into some technical challenges. But it's not only a technical problem. Like, first of all, we need to like see what kind of advantages we could offer by expanding or by creating a system on a layer 2 chain or a rollup or whatever. And this is weirdly, I guess, not so obvious for like a stable coin / borrowing system as we are at Liquidity. It's like we are a bit struggling with the same issues as Maker is, because they just they have a long thread on that. Like, they're also looking into similar solutions. Like, the question is, like, when you create a stable coin, I mean, you also need to integrate it. You also need to make it popular. Like, you don't want to just multiply, like create like multiple versions of a stable coin everywhere, because that somehow dilutes the whole brand and dilutes the whole utility of your system. So you have to be careful in what your system is supposed to achieve when you like expand to layer 2 solutions. Of course, you can do bridges, but then the question is, like, are you just bridging the token, or are you bridging the borrowing system as well, or just the borrowing system? Or we also have this kind of stability pool, which is the mechanism that backs the loans. And then like we just had some ideas around that maybe we could use it to act as a bridge at the same time, so that the stability pool can basically back tokens that you can move around to other chains and move back. So, I mean, there are a few open questions we need to first get clarity on before we can even decide on which chain we want to use or which layer 2 solution. And there are like the technical difficulties around EVM compatibility. I mean, many or most of the layer 2 solutions are claiming that they're EVM compatible. I mean, that's true for the most part, but there are still some exceptions to the rule, at least when it comes to block height and block time. They might not be as compatible, or in some systems like Polygon, the native token is not Ether, but their own tokens. So you have to change your interfaces. And there are a couple of issues that, yeah, we need to first dive deeper before we can like decide on a strategy.
Yeah, well, I mean, for you guys and kind of for Ampleforth as well, there's some really interesting questions when it comes to other chains, because you kind of, like you were saying, do you want to just bridge the token? At which point you can, but to be honest, it seems like most of the use cases, at least for these things, like people don't just want like a token to trade around. They want to interact with the protocol. They want a way to get an interest rate or a way to use leverage. Or an Ampleforth, like access to the rebasing and things like that. So how do you but then if you split the whole protocol, then you're sort of cutting your liquidity in half. You're like, you have two systems that are competing for liquidity with each other. How do you do you see that sort of being more of a problem that, well, I guess when we get big enough, it won't matter if we split liquidity, or maybe there will be some sort of better oracle mechanism for bridging it back and forth? Just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. So the way we look at it is, so I guess we're going to step back and look at the economics of moneyness of things. We sort of view monetary assets defined by two things. So it's the nature of its scarcity, and then its use value. Its efficiency is determined by liquidity, right? So you definitely don't want to split liquidity if you don't have to. But for Ample, like the scarcity is determined by the rules of the supply policy, which exists on Ethereum. So the supply policy and the oracles exist on Ethereum. And then if we say you have Ample on the Ethereum chain and then Ample on some other remote chain, as long as the Ample on the remote chain responds to the same supply policy as the other Amples on Ethereum, and as long as you can send Ample tokens back and forth, then it's really the same asset, right? It is the same Ample. It's just sort of represented or existing in a different place than Ethereum. And so, yeah, so I think that's very important that we're absolutely, at all costs trying to avoid parallel deployments. Like we don't want to just create 20 different versions of Ample in 20 different places. What people really want is we want, the same system that exists in lots of places, in the same way that, like if aluminum or silver were to exist on one part of the world, it's still aluminum or silver, silver if you take it to a different continent, right? It's still like the same commodity. And so that's how we're approaching Ample. Now, yeah, so I think Ethereum has come up a lot in the conversation, I think for good reason. Even though we talk about like lots of different chains, we're still huge fans of the Ethereum platform. Like I think Ethereum has definitely like planted a flag and owned the space of, we try to build a platform that maximizes decentralization. I think that's sort of the role of Ethereum in the space. Like they're going to take the decentralization maximalism and then try to push the envelope of that as far as they can. So, so for the Ampleforth protocol, like I see the supply policy and the oracles living on Ethereum for a very, very long time, because we want that to exist in the most decentralized platform. So like the core operations the protocol does is relatively low volume, but very, very high value, which is the perfect match for a purely centralized system like Ethereum. But there's no demand, like user demand for using the, financial applications in some areas that doesn't need such high decentralization. Maybe they're willing to sacrifice some decentralization for throughput in certain cases. And so when we think about bridging to other platforms, that's really the way we think about it, is like, okay, if people don't care so much about maximizing decentralization, they're okay with taking some risk there, but they like the lower costs where they can still sort of do what they want to do in these other swimming pools, so to speak.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, Robert, are you kind of in the same boat with thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree with what Brandon just said. Yeah, I think my main like reservation against just like blindly deploying like a new version of our system on different chains is just the fact that like it dilutes like the brand. I mean, it's like just creating different detached versions of a stable coin doesn't make it kind of dissects the whole value of our current stablecoin. So I think I'm quite wary in that regard. So that's why we are now looking into something more sophisticated, where we could at least build something that is more an extension of our protocol, maybe not a full extension, or at least something which is at least partially bridged, so that there is a way back and forth, like at least there is this stable coin living on mainnet and maybe some like twin token living on a layer 2 net, and they can be interchanged at least in normal, like in the happy path of, and then, yeah, but at the same time, you can offer like borrowing functionality on layer 2. Like, I mean, the big benefit for us would be like the lower gas costs, of course. I mean, for everybody, I mean, that's one of the main drivers why people would even want to build something on layer 2 chain. But maybe there is another benefit, which could be, if we were to go down that route, is that we could create like stable coin, or we could issue stable loans in a stable coin on those layer 2 chains against other collaterals than just Ether. I mean, that would also be interesting, because currently we are just limited in that regard, because Ether is our sole collateral type.
Cool.
But this is all like an ongoing research at the moment.
Yeah, I think all of it is. And David, I mean, you're building a bridge. Both of these guys were just talking about, token bridges and bridging data and things like that. So what would you say, as somebody who's been building on this, what would you say is kind of the issue to building secure decentralized bridges at the moment? And like, despite the fact that people have been talking about these since 2015, like, why don't they exist yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, one of the challenges, it comes back to that, if you want that true sort of like security model, right? There's some UX problems, right? Or there's some pieces that are missing, right? That from a UX perspective, like for example, if you're using a bridge right now, it sort of feels a little, it's just hard to get confidence that like your transaction went through unless you're like, if you're like, for example, I talked to someone recently who sent some funds over to Polygon. They were saying that it took about 10 minutes, right? And they just didn't know what was happening in that 10-minute period. And it was a very stressful period of time, right? So I think if you just think about that, like it's, there's just a lot of, user experience improvements I think can be made. The other thing, to think about here is like, as you think about security, right? It's the way I kind of look at it is if we just like zoom out and think about like, where is crypto going in like years from now, right? Like, let's say 5 years from now, what is the state of the crypto market? And like, how do people view crypto? If we're talking about DeFi, right? You sort of think, okay, what are the factors people care most about when they're considering DeFi, like yield farming opportunities, for example, or like getting a loan in DeFi, right? It's going to be, what's the yield, right? Like, how much do I either receive or how much do I pay, right? It's going to be, what is the underlying security of my funds, right? So there's different ways people would measure that. There's technical security, such as smart contracts and audits and who are the auditors of this protocol and stuff like that. Then what's their track record for history, et cetera, of getting hacked or, acting weird or, not well, like maliciously or whatnot. And then there's also just the crypto economic security as well, right? Like, what are the incentives that people on this network have to not behave maliciously? And so I think, just basically being able to say, okay, here's the predictable yield I'll either get, or if I'm taking out a loan, here's what I'm paying. What's the underlying confidence I have that my funds won't get drained or rug pulled or hacked, right? And then it's sort of like, what's the easeability of the experience I have kind of moving around and adjusting things as I want, right? And so I guess that's kind of the way that we've been thinking about like the future of DeFi and the space, less so concerned about like, is this happening, over there, or is it happening over there, right? It's like, as long as, over here or over there meets the sort of underlying security requirements of a user, right? Then I feel like it's
Yeah, but I think the bridges really matter because, like you could say that, right now we have whatever, how many chains there are, and we have bridges. They're called centralized exchanges. We just move our coins to a centralized exchange and then pull them off onto a different chain. And but there's still no decentralized bridge. You know what I mean? Like, it's still it's still sort of debatable if we have such thing as a trustless Bitcoin Ethereum bridge. And that's, people have been trying to build that for years. Is there any sort of like hope you would see that like eventually do you guys, I guess any of you, do you envision like all of these chains eventually being connected, or do you still seeing these sort of disparate chains with more slow centralized bridging?
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it, was I see all those things being connected, and then those being sort of the criteria people look at as they consider different options, because it becomes easier to use these bridges and move around from chain to chain. So yeah, that was kind of, you kind of like hit it exactly where I was going with it, which was just, those are the things like I think we think people will care about the most. But then it's like those things, having this cross bridge system in place will basically allow for those like important characteristics to be what really matters, right? So
yeah, cool. Anybody else feel free to jump in. But my question too, another one would be, maybe for like, I guess Robert, would be, I'm sure you've seen like, if you guys are thinking about putting Liquity on other chains, at some point, like, you actually don't want too high of your token on other chains, or else it actually becomes a giant security risk. Like people I'm sure you guys have talked about like, if too much Bitcoin is locked on Ethereum, what's the security implications of that? you know, do you guys worry that eventually like much of your coins are going to be locked on these say centralized rollups or something like that, or L2s with say not the same trust assumptions as Ethereum?
Well, I'm not quite sure if that's the main issue I see in this regard, but what I can see as an issue is if the collateral token that Liquity is using, like let's say if we were to use a bridged Ether token on any layer 2 solution, or even some native token on that specific chain, and now the layer 2 version of Liquity grows too big, then it would become the main driver of this token. I mean, the underlying collateral could then be really reliant on the demand created by the Liquity borrowing system. And that could become an issue, because then you cannot make the argument anymore that the token that you're using as collateral, that its price is really exogenous to your system, then becomes endogenous, because your system will have a big impact on the price. And then this would probably negatively impact all the security assumptions that we have. And I mean, our system is based on some exogenous Ether price that's like not as volatile as maybe some token that is just moved around by our own system.
Cool. Yeah, and Brandon, anything on last two?
Yeah, so I think security is a tough question. There's probably a few different layers to this. So I think the most important, security aspect for at least our protocol specifically is the oracles. So we want to make sure that we get primarily, at the top of the stack, good price data from the marketplace coming into our oracle. And so even though we might bridge to a non-Ethereum chain, and even though there might be markets there where people are trading with their own spot price, I think it would be a long time before we choose to actually incorporate those markets into our price feeds as supply policies. Because if someone were to find a vulnerability in that liquidity pool, then they could maybe do some funny things with the marketplace. They could feedback into the protocol. So I think that's one thing that we have to be very mindful of. Aside from that, Ample is more like a floating price token, at least mechanically, a lot of ways, than something that relies on collateral or debt. And so, yeah, in the worst case scenario, there could be a lot of tokens on some remote chain that get locked. So maybe something goes wrong with the communication channel or the bridge going back. Maybe they just get locked there forever. But that happens already. Just on Ethereum, people will send tokens to a smart contract, will just get into a black hole and you can't recover this. So, aesthetically, it might be weird if the total supply is this, but the actual number is, somewhere below that. But we already kind of live in that world already. Yeah, I think it's from the user's perspective, it's more of like an individual. How safe do I feel using this platform or this platform? Do I think I would be able to exit if I needed to? And I think that's something that as a user you just have to know before you start using those platforms. And that maybe is the hardest problem. So there's the hard technical problems of actually building this stuff, but the user experience is going to be very, very difficult to get right. And I don't know if we will for a long time, right? So just like understanding the space, I think that's the minimum bar you have to get to. Even that is hard. So like, what's the difference between a layer 1, a side chain, a layer 2? And then you have things like Aurora that looks like a layer 2 and talks like a layer 2, but its execution layer is actually a layer 1, but it doesn't have its own token. So like, what is it?
Right.
A user is in the hard position of trying to figure out like what to do and what's safe. That's really, really hard. And I don't know if we'll solve that for a long time. I think the space is going to get potentially very, very complicated before it gets simple again.
Cool. And kind of like the last question I'll give all of you guys before we sort of start wrapping it up, unless you guys want to talk about something else. I think I'm sure you guys are all kind of successful projects, and one of the things we get approached by other chains all the time, saying, come build on us, we'll give you a grant or whatever. And, we're like, well, let's see some demand first. Let's see some, a reason for us to build over there and not dilute our brand. But what would it take, like, for, if you're talking to other chains, what do you guys need to go build over there? Right? I think some of you have said EVM compliance. Some of you, is it a speed issue? Is it a programming language issue? Is it more of a philosophy issue as far as decentralization goes? Even for like, exfil, where you guys are, not even launched yet. What would it take if you guys are fighting, if they're trying to get you to move away from Ethereum and say, come build on our chain or come bridge our chain? What would it take? Yeah. So David, you want to go first? Since you're
Sure.
the young one.
So basically the question is, like, if some chain says, hey, come build with us, what would it take to get us to sort of focus on that? Is that the...
Yeah, instead of Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty focused on Ethereum. Like, I guess our belief is that once Ethereum scales, it will continue to position itself as like sort of the go-to DeFi, the main DeFi solution. Not to say there won't be others. It's just like at this point you have large bag holders of other chains, and clearly I think it's hard to I'm quite confident to say there'll be other chains, right? It's just I think we want to make sure we're agnostic, right? Like we're starting with Ethereum. We believe in Ethereum. We've been Ethereum supporters for a long time, right? We think the scaling solutions that are coming are quite exciting. But that sort of what I was alluding to earlier is like we also believe that if there's attractive DeFi opportunities on other chains and people want to go after those, as well as feel confident that their funds are secure, right? Then like we want to support those use cases, right? We want to be able to say people should be able to do that as well. So yeah, I don't think it's I think to rephrase like how we're thinking about this, I'm not sure we're thinking about it as like a one or the other, but we're definitely excited to work with like different chains and sort of bridge the gap that seems to exist between some of the UX there. So hopefully that helps.
Cool. Yeah. Brandon, you want to
go? Sure. Yeah, I think as our project gets more and more decentralized, right? So we released our governance token not too long ago. We're trying to decentralize as much as we can. As that happens more, the viewpoints and opinions of us start to matter less, right? So our goal is really to sort of follow and support the community is to the best way that we can, right? And so we'll go anywhere where the community has sort of natural or organic demand. I think in the same way that silver is impartial to the environment around it, like I think Ample or any monetary asset should also be impartial to the way it's used. And so I think it probably doesn't make much sense for us to integrate with some platform just to say that people can hold Ample there. Like it's not very useful. It doesn't provide much value. Ample is really designed to be used in financial contracts and instruments like that. So I think it makes the most sense for us to prioritize places where there's a community, where there's organic demand, and there's some sort of ecosystem for us to plug into. I think those are the three most important things that would direct the development effort.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you guys get it probably like we do. Whenever you have like the decentralized, your community wants to vote. A lot of your community doesn't quite get a lot of these security implications. So I feel like a lot of times they do just want you to partner with every other chain out there. So then you can say that you're partnered with every other chain out there. If you want to say something to your community about why that might be a bad idea or why that might be just adding too much work for the core team.
Right. Yeah, I think, that is a sort of trade-off, because there's always, as long as there's going to be some portion in the community that wants news to make that happen.
Yeah.
And so like as someone who does development work, one of the most valuable things we can do is do some analysis and look at the ramifications of certain design decisions, right? Because essentially these are sort of design decisions of a very large ecosystem that's being developed. It is a sort of complex trade-off, but a lot of that is just sort of coming down to setting healthy patterns of discourse within the community too. So like ideally you also want to, and it's very important to cultivate a sort of incisive, interested community that's sort of focused on solving problems for the long term. And I think we're sort of seeing a lot of that recently in our community, which is really, really cool to see. I hope we see even more of that. But like, I think that's very, very important to get right for a project. You need that sort of healthy base of people who care about the project and want to shepherd it in the right ways.
Yeah, no, for those that don't know, there's an open Ampleforth proposal to include Tellor, and it's a fun, lively discussion. So we've been enjoying being in there and reading them. So thanks for having us. And Robert?
Yeah, I would say there are a number of criteria or requirements that we would ideally want to see fulfilled before expanding to a layer 2 solution. Like one of them, of course, would be security. I mean, that's like kind of obvious, but also decentralization, because we as a protocol, we take it really far or really seriously. And it would be a bit strange if the underlying network would be less decentralized as our system in a way. And of course, Ethereum is one of the most decentralized like networks out there. So it's hard to compete already, but I mean, we will need to make some compromise there, most probably. And then another thing, as already mentioned by Brandon, is the whole community ecosystem part, which is also very important, because we don't just want to give out loans in some random token, but we want this token to become a stable coin that's used in other systems. And then the issue is that with all the optimistic rollups, if you have to go back to the main net, if you want to use your LUSD that you minted on a layer 2 chain, then you have to wait like 7 days or whatever this challenge period is. So that doesn't really make sense. I mean, that impairs the whole user experience. I mean, if anything, then we would like to see an existing ecosystem on the layer 2 network already, so that we don't, like our users or borrowers wouldn't need to go back to the main chain, so that they can use their tokens already without moving them around. Yeah, I mean, and those are the key factors that matter.
Cool. Yeah, well, if you want to get rid of that 7-day wait period, the guy, David, might have a solution for you that he's working on. Sort of their whole thing. But yeah, I think, no, thank you guys so much for joining us on the call, and this was an awesome conversation. So I kind of look forward to working with each one of you guys and kind of continuing finding out how we can work on different chains and work more on Ethereum together. So thanks. Any parting words, or pass it back to Adam?
Yeah, Robert, where can people learn more about your project? Where can they get more information?
Yeah, I mean, they can just visit liquidity.org, and we have a docs section, which is quite comprehensive. And also, like, just visit our YouTube channel. We have a few videos up there that are interesting to watch.
Awesome. David, how about your project?
Yeah, so we just we wrapped up the hackathon just a couple of weeks ago. So basically, we're still in the early stages here, but we're moving towards getting our MVP rolled out. We have a Discord. I'm not sure if I have the ability to show what the link is, but you could also find us on Twitter it's at xfil_finance. There'll be more to come soon.
Awesome. We didn't mean to bother you on the beach over there.
Yeah.
Brandon, where can people learn about Ampleforth?
You can go to our website, ampleforth.org. There you can find links to Discord and Telegram. On Twitter, we're at ampleforth.org. We have a pretty lively community that likes to talk about lots of different things.
Awesome. And last but not least,
that gave me an idea. So basically, if you go to xfil.finance and then you just scroll down to, it's just a landing page. So bear with us on that. But if you scroll down, you'll see the link to our Discord and to our Twitter. So that'll make it pretty easy. So there you go.
Perfect. And what about you, Nick? Where can people learn more about Tellor?
Tellor.io. So happy to.
Awesome. And Tellor's been on a few times actually during the REIMAGINE conference. So we appreciate them and their support. Nick and his team put on this panel. A couple takeaways from just a kind of recap this discussion. Very great discussion. One of the things that I took away from it, we're talking about layer twos and bridging and partnering. And what I've heard from everybody really ultimately is that it's not about just partnering, and it's not about just having as many chains as possible. There's some requirements, there's some standards, it's community driven in terms of not just community making their suggestions or opinions, but an actual utility of the network, which is something that's eye-opening. People just think, we should just bridge everywhere and connect everywhere. But what I've heard from everybody in this discussion was it's more than that, right? Security, privacy, decentralization, all of the fundamentals need to play a role in order for one to continue bridging or at least consider, being able to move assets back and forth. So again, thank you all for joining. I want to thank Tellor for supporting this and supporting Reimagine in general for the last year. They've been a big sponsor of ours and very fortunate to be working with them. And aside from that, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Reimagine 2021. I'm your host, Adam, from the Mouseball team, joined here by Nick, CTO at Tellor, and he put this beautiful panel together, and we hope to see everybody again and enjoy the conference. Thank you, everybody.
Cool.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks
Guys.